Welcome to The Explainer. You know, power dynamics are everywhere, playing out all around us, often by rules nobody ever writes down. Today, we're going to break down some timeless principles from a fascinating and, let's be honest, often controversial guide to power, using some dramatic stories from history to see how these rules work in the real world. So, let's start with a crazy question from a story back in 17th century France. Seems impossible, right? Imagine you honor your boss, the king, no less, with the most spectacular event anyone has ever seen. And your reward is a jail cell for life. But it happened. And the reason why it happened reveals something fundamental about human nature. Well, the guy at the heart of this, Nicolas Fouquet, he didn't commit treason or anything like that. No, his crime was way more subtle. He broke a fundamental law of power, one that's all about the ego and insecurity that flows just underneath the surface of any hierarchy. And that brings us right to our first law of power: never outshine the master. It's really all about this delicate balance between impressing the people above you and making them feel insecure. It's like walking a tightrope, and as we're about to see, the fall can be, well, pretty brutal. So what's the core idea here? It's pretty simple, actually. You want to make your superiors feel totally secure in their jobs. You want them to look even more brilliant than they are, not less. The whole goal is to make sure your own talents never feel like a threat, but instead make them look better. Okay, so let's get back to our guy, Nicolas Fouquet. He was King Louis XIV's finance minister, super smart, cultured, and crazy rich. To show off his brand new chateau, he decides to throw a party for the king. But look, this wasn't just any party. It was a spectacle that accidentally sealed his doom. And bam, the very next day, he's arrested. He never saw freedom again. I mean, this party was the real deal. It had a new play by the famous writer Molière, this incredible dinner from the legendary chef Fattel. The grounds were breathtaking, the fountains were like something out of a dream. It was, by all accounts, perfect. A little too perfect. Fouquet thought he was giving a tribute, but the king saw it as a challenge. And this quote really just nails it, doesn't it? Fouquet had, totally by accident, put on a show of taste and wealth that rivaled and maybe even surpassed the king's. In his effort to impress, he made his master feel small. And for a king like Louis XIV, the Sun King, well, that was an offense he just couldn't forgive. Okay, so now let's look at the flip side. A huge success story from the same era, the astronomer Galileo. When Galileo discovered the moons of Jupiter, what did he do? Did he name them after himself? Nope. He called them the Medicean stars, after his patrons, the powerful Medici family. He literally put their name up in the heavens, making his epic discovery a tribute to their greatness. And that right there just perfectly illustrates the whole point. You've got to make your wins look like they're just a reflection of your master's own greatness. Fouquet tried to be a second sun in the sky, competing with the Sun King. Galileo, he was smarter. He was just the telescope, helping his patrons see their own glory even more clearly. All right, let's move on to the second law. This one shifts the focus away from your bosses and onto the people right beside you. And honestly, this one's even more counterintuitive. It's all about who you trust. Just think about it for a second. When you size up potential threats in your life, who do you picture? Probably your obvious rivals, right? The people you're openly competing with. But what if the real danger is much, much closer? Yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow. But the logic here is that friendship is basically the perfect breeding ground for envy. A friend knows all your weak spots, and they can feel personally diminished by your success. An old enemy, though, they've got something to prove. If you hire them, they're often way more loyal, because they feel like they have to earn your trust. So the law itself is this really stark warning. We drop our guard with friends, and that makes us super vulnerable. They're often the first to get jealous, and they're in the perfect spot to do some real damage. And, history gives us this absolutely brutal, tragic example of this law in action. Back in the 9th century, there was this Byzantine emperor, Michael III. He had a best friend named Basilius. Michael pulled this guy out of poverty, gave him everything: education, money, power. He made him his closest advisor. And what happens in the end? Basilius, just eaten up by ambition, murders his friend and benefactor to take the throne. The French philosopher Voltaire really put it best. Michael III thought he was building this unbreakable bond of loyalty, but instead, all that generosity just bred resentment and this lust for more power. The emperor could handle his known enemies, but he never saw the dagger coming from the hand of his own trusted friend. Okay, so after hearing these pretty chilling stories, what are we supposed to do with all this? I mean, the world these rules describe can seem pretty cynical, right? But it also gives us this incredibly sharp look into human psychology that's, well, it's hard to argue with. So really, the big takeaway here isn't that you need to be ruthless. It's about being aware. It's about understanding that ego and insecurity are these huge, powerful forces in pretty much every interaction. So it means you gotta manage how things look, make your superiors feel safe, and be super careful about mixing friendship and ambition, because envy, that stuff is poison. And that really leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? Is this all just a dark, cynical guide to manipulating people? Or is it more like a map of human nature, a description of how we've always been and how we'll always be? Because like it or not, the game of power is always being played. The only real question is, do you understand the rules?